Welcome to Roughing It with Ruth, the channel where everything is a bit rough around the edges. As a new hiker or new backpacker, I think one of the biggest fears that I used to have was being conned or scammed by somebody in the outdoor industry. And these days with YouTube, that is even more of a concern because anybody can go on YouTube and make an outdoor video. And it's very difficult to tell sometimes whether you're getting good advice, whether that person has ulterior motives. But I do firmly believe that the vast majority of outdoor YouTubers are not out there to scam you. But that being said, I do think that there is a lot of scope for people to be misled online, particularly on YouTube. So here are some really easy ways that you can figure out whether someone really knows what they're talking about without having to be an expert yourself. So the first thing that you can do when you're trying to assess whether someone actually knows what they're talking about is to really listen to the language that they use. If they use a lot of absolute language terms, they might not know what they're talking about. What I mean by absolute language terms are terms that leave no room for argument. Things like always, never. When people use black and white language like this, it can sometimes be because they are actually a little bit insecure in the subject matter and they feel more comfortable in a situation where it is very clear cut, this is correct and this is incorrect, when in reality, almost nothing in life is like that. Another thing that you can pay attention to when you're listening to the language that they're using is whether they're using very complicated terms or phrases rather than putting things simply. This can be due to a variety of different reasons. Some people feel that complicated language makes them sound smarter. So again, they may be insecure about their own knowledge in the subject and they're trying to make themselves sound smarter. Or what often happens is that people do not actually understand the subject matter well enough to be able to simplify it into simple terms. So they are stuck using the complicated explanations that they may have heard from other sources without actually being able to dumb it down into its simplest version. Then number 3, let's move on to looking at the person's actual behavior. Something that for me is a major red flag when I am listening to someone talk about any topic is if they belittle other people's ideas. So if you see, for instance, on YouTube, outdoor YouTubers attacking each other, particularly if they are attacking each other in a very personal way rather than perhaps just debating the topic at hand, that is a really, really clear sign that that person does not know what they are talking about. They feel very defensive because somewhere inside them they know that they don't know what they're talking about, and their reaction is to try and aggressively belittle other people, which is not a great kind of behavior. I can specifically, with hiking and backpacking, think back to moments where I have been very critical of people who take a lot of gear and pack a lot of weight into their backpacks when they go on a trip. And I think a lot of that came from my own defensiveness about trying to make my backpack as light as possible. And other people would give me pushback about that as well. And I think both of us, myself and them, were feeling a bit defensive about our choices in the outdoor industry. And the correct way to go about that is to just take a deep breath and remember that we're all human and try to take away lessons from everybody's different ways of doing things, not get defensive and try to defend yourself by belittling other people's choices. Something else that you can quite easily pick up on if you've been following someone for a really long time, so if you've been watching a whole lot of their videos, is whether or not they can admit that they were wrong. People who can admit that they were in fact wrong in the past, or that there were other ways of doing things that they didn't acknowledge in the past, those types of people are generally very confident, self-assured people who probably do know what they're talking about. And the kinds of people who get incredibly defensive and even angry when there is a suggestion that they might be wrong, those kinds of people often don't know what they're talking about. Then another thing about their own behavior is looking at the way that they respond to being questioned about something. Often in the outdoor industry, there are a lot of different people at different stages of their journey all coming together. And I think sometimes there's a bit of pressure on outdoor YouTubers to always be the experts. And sometimes they don't have the answers. And instead of saying, I don't have the answer, sometimes they mock people who are asking them questions. That is another really major red flag for me. If someone is asking you a question, you should be able to treat them in a decent manner. This is actually a really good example on a particular Facebook group that I am part of for a certain trail in South Africa. Somebody once asked if they use the slack packing services that are available on this trail, do they need to pack their gear in a backpack or do they need to pack their gear in any kind of bag like a suitcase or a duffel bag? And some people just answered the question in the comments, but there were one or two people who, instead of answering the question, said things like, have you never tried to carry a bag down a trail before? I can't believe that you would try to make someone walk down a trail carrying a suitcase. And that sort of thing is completely unnecessary. And I think the kinds of people who would respond in that manner are definitely not trustworthy resources for knowledge in the outdoors. Another really important thing to try to figure out is whether the person who is giving you the information stands to gain something if they convince you of their point of view. As a very common example of this, I can point out things where people are trying to convince you that a product is really fantastic because if you buy that product, they are actually going to get money. Those sorts of situations are not black and white either. In some cases, the actual creators of a product are incredibly honest about it and can be trusted. But in a lot of cases, particularly if someone is trying to hide the fact that they are going to gain something from you if you believe them, I would be a little bit hesitant about that information because they are incentivized to make you believe something. They might not tell you only the truth. They might pick and choose what they tell you to try and convince you of their point of view in order to get something from you. And then lastly, trust your instincts, trust your gut. If something feels off to you, then that person does not deserve your unquestioning respect and obedience. For instance, I have been on hikes where the leader of the hike has thought it would be completely fine to leave people behind because they were not keeping up with the group. Even when I was first starting hiking and backpacking, in my gut, I felt that this was absolutely unacceptable. And I actually stopped hiking with that particular hiking club because I felt that that was really just wrong. And now that I've learned a lot more about hiking and backpacking, that has validated that feeling for me. Leaving people behind is never okay, especially if you're just leaving them on their own. Anything can happen to them out there. I hope that you've enjoyed this video. If you have your own tips for how to tell whether someone is trying to scam you or whether someone knows what they're talking about, then please leave them in the comments below because I would love to hear your opinions. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you would like to see more from me, then you can click on my channel name to see videos that I've made in the past, or you can subscribe to my channel to see videos that I'm going to make in the future.